Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Alt Kings podcast. I'm your host, Tate, and today we have the pleasure of discussing everything Archway with one of their core contributors to Archway, Kem. Kem, how you doing today?
I'm doing excellent, man. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. Definitely excited to learn more about Archway and venture more into the Cosmos ecosystem on this podcast. I'd love to start off with who are you and what does it mean to be a core contributor to Archway?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. I guess to start, CryptoChem is my moniker, if you were, my pseudo anonymous name I go by on crypto Twitter, but Max is my real name. Anyone can feel free to call me Max Chem. I definitely go by either. And yeah, I work for Phi Labs. So technically, Phi Labs is a software development company, and we are one of the core contributors to Archway, as you mentioned. And really, what that means is just we're one of those initial groups that's contributed to that core foundation of the blockchain itself. So building out the core infrastructure, like taking the SDK, adding on custom modules, creating the baseline for what will then be people then build applications on top of. We started out by building out Archway, and then we've since kind of had more people start to contribute in terms of applications, tools, things like that. And together, that's how you create this decentralized blockchain of different contributors all working towards that same goal of building out a blockchain and the tools that you need to build on top of it.
Yeah, and we definitely need those contributors, that's for sure. And what I just want to clarify, so Cosmos is the layer 0, Archway is a layer 1 off of Cosmos, correct?
Yeah, that's definitely one way to look at it. It's a little confusing in the sense that Archway has no real tie to the Cosmos Hub or Atom itself. But where they do align is that they're using the same SDK. That software development kit, that core functionality that we use is the same, similar with Tendermint or Comet BFT as it's called now, which is the consensus mechanism. They're very similar in the technical aspects of the core foundation, but they're very different, right? Every layer one in the Cosmos is really its own blockchain and should be looked at as a layer one. I think what makes the Cosmos unique, though, is that they have this IBC interoperability kind of
Yeah.
protocol that allows all these L1s to act like they're interoperable, and therefore makes the Cosmos SDK itself pretty much a layer zero, to your point. But I guess the one thing differentiate, just to make clear to the listeners who may not be familiar, is that just because you're using the Cosmos SDK doesn't necessarily mean you're tying to Atom or the hub or driving value to the hub. And I think that's very important to understand, as the technology itself is called Cosmos SDK, which is different from the Cosmos Hub. And I know that is quite confusing.
Yeah. What would you say differentiates Archway from other L1s on Cosmos or connected to Cosmos?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And you could argue what makes it different from any chain, right? And
Yeah.
I would say it's twofold. It's one, the actual architecture of the blockchain itself, so using the Cosmos SDK, but also just the economic design of it. So part of it is a lot of chains will be built out in a way where the economic design of the layer one itself may not be sustainable. So maybe they have high inflation, or maybe they have no way to really capture the value of the activity happening on chain. And therefore, it's just not, it doesn't really make a builder want to build there, because now not only are you trying to build a successful product, but you're also fighting the economics of the chain you're building on itself.
Yeah.
So what Archway tried to do is build a economic model that is more aligned with the people who are building and bringing value to the chain. So I think that's one big piece of it, is aligning the economic model you're building on with the application layer, so that the apps are being remunerated for what they're bringing on chain. And really, I'd say the other key factor is how we distribute value back to the application layer. So it's pretty common to see people do like fee splits, right? Where a user might spend gas to use an application, and half of that gas will go to the app itself so that they can earn from that interaction. And then the L1 will earn as well. But what we found is it's really not significant to the applications unless you have significant volume. This is especially apparent in the Cosmos, because the Cosmos has inherently low gas fees. So with low gas fees, it requires much more transaction volume to become a significant amount of value to a builder or to a group of engineers building out applications. So what Archway is trying to do, and what we did do, was build modules into the SDK that allows you to distribute that value back to the application layer in a way that is aligned with how much activity and demand they're bringing on chain. That way you can truly align which products are being used the most, and then those people should be rewarded the most because they are driving value to the layer one and driving value to the network, by bringing on TVL, by bringing on user activity and having people spend gas in their apps. They should be rewarded as such. And that's something that's been missing. Most layer ones operate as, hey, we'll directly benefit from the users, and then the apps will indirectly benefit from the layer one itself. We took that model and flipped it on its head a little bit and said, if the app layer is where all the value is being created and that's where all the users are going to be like actually interacting with your chain, why wouldn't you subsidize that so that you can drive them to want to create more value? They should share in some of the rewards of the network since they are bringing people to it. Security is important, so we definitely think you should still incentivize security.
Yeah.
But we also believe that the application layer is important as well because that's what you're securing. And if there's nothing there, then incentivizing security is somewhat pointless. So that's really the key difference for Archway, I'd say, is we're pointing more of the incentives and rewards back to the actual developers based on the traction they bring, to the point where we're actually subsidizing them with inflation itself. And I believe we're the first chain to have done that. And I do think it's going to be a very difficult thing to try to recreate just because of the time and effort we put into developing the modules to allow us to track and distribute in this way at both the protocol and smart contract level.
So you'd say Archway rewards developers based on how much they develop on chain, and that's more or less how the contributors value and within the ecosystem.
Yeah, and I would even go further to say it's based on how much traction or activity they bring to the network
Gotcha.
themselves. So the way it actually works is like every interaction, they're rewarded by getting half the gas, but then they're also getting rewarded each block based on how much gas is being consumed each block on their smart contracts. If you have if your app's being used all the time and it's taking up 80% of the block, you're actually going to get percent approximately of the inflation from that block will go to your app because it's saying, hey, basically, you're driving the activity, you're driving all this gas to being used on the network, which drives value to the layer one.
Yeah.
Let's distribute it back to you since you're the one who should be capturing this. This is your work. This is the people are coming here to use your product. And that's a huge gap that we've been ignoring this whole time is the layer ones are great and the infrastructure is super important, but so is the application layer. And right now, the application layer is just not able to capture the value that they're bringing on chain because the only way they can do so is through fees or by taking a small portion of the gas and then hoping that the value of the network will increase, which will then make their portion of it more valuable.
That's a really good point that you bring up. Bring regarding the fees on chain. Where do they go on most chains? So they're just flowing themselves and circulating back into the network one way or another. But it should be going to the people who contribute and develop things like the apps on chain,
Yeah.
who actually bring that value, bring that influx of users, and bring the volume to the chain. Therefore, they should be rewarded for their work. And I see that's a very viable product, it seems, and it only reassures the developers at the end of the day for the work that they're providing is going to be reciprocated with value based on the chain that they're working with. Wouldn't you say?
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a totally fair point. And to one of my earlier points is a lot of those fees are just going right back to validators.
Yeah.
And to what I said earlier, that I agree, we need to do that. I operate validators myself for different chains, so I fully understand the importance of incentivizing security.
Yeah.
But I do think we are really undervaluing the importance of also incentivizing the application layer because otherwise, what are you securing? And honestly, why would the validators? Why should they get all of the share of the rewards of the network when the applications are what's driving them there? Most
True.
people aren't going to a chain because of the validator, right?
Yeah.
As long as there are validators, that's all they're really looking for. But they will go to a specific chain for a specific application. In fact, I argue most users don't care what chain they're on at all. They just want to use a specific application, and wherever that app is, they'll go, and they just want a good user experience. They want to use the application and have it do what they expect.
Yeah.
What chain it's on and what's happening in the background for them is irrelevant to most. I think we need to recognize that. And that's something I don't think we really have really self-reflected on and said, do we really care who the validators are or what network we're on? Or do we really care about is the product good and is it working as intended?
Most people don't care about what chain they're on until they have astronomical gas fees and transaction fees.
100%.
Yeah.
They don't care until it's, oh, now I can't afford to use this chain because it's too
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah.
Or, hey, there's too much slippage every time I try to use something on this chain. There's other things that are going to drive them away. Or, hey, this UX is the worst UX I've ever seen. I can't stand this chain.
Yep.
but they're going to go wherever the product is and the good products are that do as they intend and then are within their ability to be able to afford. I know myself personally, the reason I dug so deep into the Cosmos SDK was because back in, I think it was 2018, I was getting priced out of Ethereum back then. I just couldn't, I wasn't moving enough and
Yeah.
wasn't trading enough for me to be able to afford the gas fees or even a bridge fee. So I just had to sit on everything. And if I wanted to make a move, I had to be very sure that I was going to make at least 30% on it because the gas alone was going to set me back. And so that just became unfeasible. So I was looking for other options. That's led me to the Cosmos white paper and then ultimately led me to IBC and reading about what that could do. And that really is what opened my eyes to, wow, this is blockchains really makes a lot of sense to me, and distributed ledgers, smart contracts, all this is starting to make a lot of sense. But where do we go from here from Ethereum? Because I can't afford to use this. There has to be better
Yeah.
options. You kind of start going down that rabbit hole. And now there's trade-offs for sure. But I think over time, I've just seen it play out exactly as I expected, where as we get more adoption, people are looking for more efficient options in general. Because
Yeah.
you just can't afford to. It's becoming like an institutional chain, if you will, where you have to have large sums of money to be able to participate, and that's just not how you're going to get retail.
Yeah, definitely. And even if you do have that capital to suffice for the gas fees and ensure that your transactions go through accordingly, you're still spending upwards of 50 to sometimes even a couple $100 just for one transaction. And in most cases, even if you have that money, it hits the soul a little different,
Yeah,
even if you send that transaction. And so it's just not sustainable. It's not efficient nor effective. And I'd love to transition this outside of just validators on Cosmos within Archway as well. How does Archway ensure security and scalability for the DApps being built on the platform?
yeah. When it comes to security, obviously a lot of it does come down to just network security, like how
Yeah,
secure is your network. But I guess what we're trying to do is trying to build a path for applications to basically sustain themselves, right?
sure.
And be able to do things like get audits and prepare themselves for compliance. So we're trying to protect them in more than just one way. One from just like the financial side of things by giving them a way to directly earn from what they're bringing on chain. But I think another thing we're trying to do is work with them directly with trying to get them aligned with different, auditors and different groups that can help them provide audits so they can get their contracts looked at and have a little less risk on that end. But ultimately, yeah, really what we're trying to do is build out a robust set of validators and professional grade operators so that you can be confident and rely on our network. I think one thing we're looking at right now is the cost of security and whether or not chains are overpaying for it and trying to figure out where that sweet spot is so that you're protecting the users as well and the application builders by not diluting them through overpaying for security.
Yeah,
I think we've seen that happen a lot across the board in the Cosmos, just with the kind of standard inflation model that has been used. I think it's done a kind of a disservice to the Cosmos, and it's actually become the standard, which is something that we're trying to change up because of what we've seen. If you look at a lot of the top chains in the Cosmos from the bull run to now, you saw that quick up, and then it was a very stark down, and then that rounding out of the curve.
yeah,
And I like to think a lot of that is due to the way they set up their incentive models, which is on a fixed schedule called like a thirdening model, or where it's like the incentives are given out on a curve based on time. What that doesn't do is align block demand with incentives. So there's times early on where you have these really high incentives and you have a ton of people using the chain and you don't need to incentivize them, but you are. Or you're incentivizing security when you don't need to because people are paying for it because blocks are full. Meanwhile, as you get maybe the chain starts to lose that initial traction, and now your incentives are actually getting smaller. So you should maybe be incentivizing more now, but you're not. You're actually doing the opposite because it's on a fixed schedule.
yeah,
It's not reflexive to demand at all. And I think that's a huge security risk. And it may not security risk is the word, but it's a huge financial risk to people who are participating in it. I know, and I don't mean to pick on a specific protocol here, but it's an example I use because it was eye opening to me with osmosis, actually. For a long time, as a staker, even if you were staked 100%, you were getting diluted because the emissions per epoch were greater than the APR they were giving to stakers because they had to then incentivize the LPs as well with
yeah,
a portion of that staking reward. So what that did was it put users in a position where whether you were LPing or you were staking, didn't matter. You were being diluted. You had no way of avoiding dilution because they were incentivizing more than was actually being like it then was being earned by the actual
Yeah.
stakers. So that really opened my eyes up to, wow, well, how do you fix that? You have to build a system where it's reflexive. When there is demand, there should be less incentives, and that should create a counter-inflationary type scenario. And that's that EIP 1559 implementation, which I know Osmosis did integrate into their system now, which is, I think, a great step in the right direction. And it's something that we've had built in from pretty much the start as well, because we saw that as a huge area that can be improved in the Cosmos, and that's having active fee markets and being able to really adjust to demand, and then have your blocks actually in your incentives reflect that demand. So yeah, it's not necessarily directly related to what you're saying, but I think it's something we've done put a lot of thought and time into, is creating this sustainable economic framework from like the core level of Archway, so that
Sure.
anyone building on top of it doesn't have to fight that battle. They just focus on their own product.
Definitely. And one thing I also want to mention would be I believe audits are going to be vital for a lot of companies, regardless of the chain. I think all companies should go through audits if you're developing DApps
Yeah,
on chain. It's only going to ensure the security of the DApps that you're building, as well as scalability if there's are influxes of users coming to the chain using
yeah,
those DApps. You don't want there to be ever any compromises that could reflect the way the DApp works, how much money is going where, just anything. You don't want
yeah,
compromises in Web3. And all it does simply, the first compromise you get, it's just going to deteriorate your reputation. And nobody likes a destroyed reputation in this space, even if it's on accident. You can
yeah.
always build back from it, but it's very hard to rebuild that reputation once it's lost.
Definitely, and to your point, that is a huge. I think that's a huge issue as well
Yeah,
in this space overall. Is like there's two issues in my eyes. One, there's not enough auditors available, so
true.
therefore the demand is very high, and therefore costs are really high, which I believe is the other problem.
Yeah,
So to your point, those are huge. Archway itself from the protocol level has had I think 3 audits now. It was
good.
Halborn originally, Oak Security, and then Informal Systems as well. So we've had these ongoing audits because what makes this whole space very difficult is you can audit a code base, but the second you start to update that or create variations of that, it's new code and needs to be re-audited. So it's kind of this never ending process of continually checking and making sure that there's no vulnerabilities, and then making sure that those are patched if there are.
Yeah,
And I know Archway from the protocol level is doing that. Where I think we're running into a big issue, and this is probably prevalent across the entire space, is the application layer is very difficult now. It's already a struggle to try to raise at the application layer or to really get a lot of capital or resources. So then to ask them to pay for these sometimes 6-figure audits becomes a very big detriment to their
yeah,
ability to actually build a successful product,
yeah,
because they have to make that choice of, do I take on incredible risk and go in debt to maybe get this audited, or do I have to go all these different avenues and make all these really big sacrifices to hopefully get an audit, or do I launch this product without it and take the risk that users are at risk? And I think from the people I've talked to, I'd say almost 98% of the application builders do not want to launch their product without an audit, but most of them are forced to, because they need funding. They need to get their product out there, and so they can get that value. But they're stuck in the rock and a hard place where it's like, we need this money, we need this out there so we can keep building, but
scale.
we don't feel comfortable doing it without an audit, which we can't afford, and no
True.
one will fund us. How do you fix that? And that's where we're really struggling to figure that out. And we're trying to actually work with a few different firms to come up with either an audit DAO or some sort of grant program specifically for this, to give these teams the ability to get an audit, or at least a high level kind of assurance, at least initially, so they can launch their product.
Yeah.
Users can feel more comfortable. And then once they've earned enough, they can now go invest into a more in-depth audit. And unfortunately, that is risky, but I think that's really the route we're going to have to go if we want something that's actually feasible and that can work in this space. And it's not a problem I have an answer to, unfortunately, but it is a huge issue. And I do think audits are very important.
Yeah. Is there any projects out there that you could highlight right now? Maybe just give a shout out to that are building on Archway and
Yeah.
maybe building DApps or something. Any projects that catch your eye?
Yeah. So right now, I'd say the probably two most prominent are Astrovault. They're a AMM DEX. They have a very unique kind of design to how they're doing their DEX. They're using basically staking, non-compounding staking derivatives as their base pairs, and then basically utilizing the native tokens themselves to generate yield for protocol under liquidity, which is used to not only build up the DAO treasury, but also incentivize LPs and other activities on chain. So they have a really unique kind of angle on the DEX space and how it should work. And I think they're using a model out compared to how Coinbase operates with custodying the liquidity, providing you with easy access in and out of the liquidity, and providing you a portion of the yield, but also they're taking a portion for themselves to help fund operations and basically build up their balance sheet. So you look at Atom, if you bring Atom to Coinbase, they'll give you around 5 or 6%. That's because they're staking most of that underlying at about 15 to 16% natively on the hub. And so they're taking that spread. And Astrovault's doing something similar, but they're just taking much less. And then they're generating a lot of theirs through swap fees and trade fees, which go back to the AXV stakers, which AXV is not live yet, but we will be doing a public launch pad actually that they're building out themselves called Outbid in the next couple of weeks. So that will be pretty exciting and something to keep an eye on for more details on that. But Astrovault's a really cool, unique DEX that's building out. Another one I would say is really unique and has done a lot of cool things is ArchID. So they're a decentralized name service. We've seen a ton of these across the space. So I wouldn't say that part is what makes them unique. But I think what's unique about ArchID is how they've built it out. They've done a lot to make the actual domain names usable and have utility. So things like being able to have subdomains to them, being able to transfer them, being able to buy and sell them on the marketplace, being able to make offers on them. So you can actually trade them and they can have actual value. They can also be used for, like I said, using subdomains for multi-sigs and things like that. But on top of that, they're already integrating with people like Leap Wallet and some of these other wallets to have human readable addresses so that you can actually send stuff to a friend or to someone without knowing their full address or having to have them send you their wallet string or what have you. So they're doing a lot of things to actually utilize the DNS to make the user experience easier and to add functionality for what you'd actually use it for, which is like a top level domain. And so that's another one I think is really unique and hasn't really gotten quite as much attention quite yet. But they're working with a lot of partners, I think, that we'll start to see it proliferate throughout really the Cosmos and see how it interacts with all these different chains. Because technically through IBC, these domain names could be utilized across the entire Cosmos ecosystem.
Yeah, and it'd
Um,
make things so much more efficient on chain rather than having to send your, I guess it'd be your wallet address that is a just a phrase of numbers, letters, whatever you want to call it, whatever it may be, depending on chain. And for most people, they get just confused looking at that. They're like,
yeah,
so what do I do with this? And it's no, just take a step back. This is your wallet. Here it is. But if we simplified it with DNS services, it would just make things so much more simpler. Maybe making a wallet say their name or something that they are very they have a I guess a pre-consecutive notion with or something that would just be easier for them to buy, transact, and sell
yeah.
cryptocurrency.
Something they're familiar with. That's the thing is I think sometimes we make things too difficult in this space. When you think
Definitely.
about if you were to send a Venmo to someone or a Zelle or whatever you're using Cash App,
Yeah.
you're just gonna type in at their name or
Yeah.
at whatever their nickname. You may not know it like their bank account number, but you do know their nickname. And
True.
that's all we're really trying to do is if I want to send Arch to you, I can just type in your name.arch. And if you own that and I know you own that, I know it's going to you and it's going to be tied to you. And I don't have to go, you know, hey, what's your address? Can you send me that? Copy that in. Is this the right one? Okay, I am sending it. Should I send a test transaction? It really gives you a lot more confidence in being like, I know when I type in chem.arch,
Yeah.
I'm going to be sending it to my address.
Yeah.
I can remember chem.arch. If I want to send something from my hot wallet to my hardware wallet, I can just type it in. I don't have to go to my hardware wallet, copy my address, send it back over, type it in, send it. Okay, did it land? It's just sometimes, yeah, it's very simple things like a DNS that you need that can simplify the entire process. And I know other teams have done this, but they've never taken it to that next level of integrating it into wallets other than I think ICNS. But even they have done really not much in terms of pushing it or really integrating it beyond just the few chains that they want to work with. So
I believe
therefore it
Hedera
doesn't
Hashgraph has
have.
as well. They have some sort of name service for their chain, which
Yeah.
is it helps. But it's
Yeah.
not necessarily as needed because the way that Hedera's wallets are set up, it's only numbers. So it's 0 dash 0 and then a string of numbers. And the string is typically whenever you created your wallet. And it's so right now it's about, I believe, I think it's in the billions. So it'd be like 3 billion something. But if you were the first person to ever create a wallet on Hedera Hashgraph's mainnet, then it'd be just 0.01, 0.0, 1,000. So my wallet, it's super easy for me to remember. It's 0.011333134.
Yeah.
It's super tedious, super simple, and thankfully it's easy for me. But other people could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, so
Right.
on and so forth. And so those numbers can get compiled, make things a little more complex and tricky for people trying to transact. And even if you just get one number or letter wrong, that could make or break a whole entire transaction. And that could differentiate how much money somebody's losing or making.
You're all 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, assuming that's an active wallet when and especially in Hedera's example, if you just switched out one number, it's definitely going to be someone's.
Yeah, oh, yeah, it's going
Even with the
regardless.
Beck 32 or like how like Cosmos does it, if you change one number in there, it's a whole different address.
Yeah,
And if someone owns that address, yeah, they just got really lucky. But yeah, no, and I think Solana and Ethereum they both have domain name services as well that
yeah,
I think are integrated into their wallets so that you can easily utilize those to like send or transfer, swap, whatever. But it's something that Cosmos just hasn't done a great job, in my opinion, of really creating a all-inclusive domain name service that can be utilized like across the different IBC channels. So I think that's something we're trying to pursue just to unite the entire UX for a user. Leap Wallet's a team we've been working with quite a bit on that because we feel like they're doing a great job of kind of covering the entire cosmos and really building for like kind of that agnostic kind of chain wallet. And that's what we're looking for because ultimately we want people just to utilize IBC, utilize the Cosmos, and Archway can just be the smart contract hub where you host your contracts. That's where people interact with them and they earn from them, the smart contract developers will.
yeah,
And then through IBC and ICA and these different kind of Cosmos features, we can then really communicate or execute a transaction on any chain in the IBC network starting from Archway so that you're automatically earning every time someone calls your contract, even if you're doing a swap on a different chain.
wow,
And to me, that's like the ultimate vision. And that requires like a wallet that can easily interoperate and like to a user, not have them really even notice that they're going from chain to chain and they're just
true,
utilizing the assets and the apps they want. And on the back end, it's sorting out how are we going to route this to the chain we need to do what we want. And then how do we get that back to the user in a way that just displays it to them exactly how they'd expect to see it. And once we can take that complexity out and abstract that from the user, I think we have something really big. And that's what Archway is trying to do is, hey, let's be this hub where everything can start and then go do whatever it needs to do across the IBC network, bring it back here, and here it is compiled for the user. None the wiser to them. They just use the chain or they just use the interface as easiest. And then in the back end, the contract developers are earning from every interaction.
nice, incredible. Can you share possibly some insights on any recent developments or updates from Archway that have came out recently?
Yeah, so I think one was like we implemented the fee burn mechanism. So that was to create more burn pressure, get that counterinflationary kind of design or that flywheel started. And so what that does is as blocks are more full, more arches burn than emitted, which creates that deflationary kind of schedule.
Yeah,
And then in periods where blocks are not full, there's going to be more arch being emitted than burned. That's your inflationary and that's your incentive for users and the applications to then try to drive more traffic so they can earn more from those blocks. And
nice.
so I think that's unique, just creating a model that can lead to a deflationary or at least a counter inflationary type setup so that you're at more of, let's say, a 1 to 2% inflationary rate, similar to monetary policy,
Yeah,
instead of a 10 to 20% rate where you're at in that land of dilution or inflating value away. And the reason we think it works like monetary policy is because just like monetary policy, the reason for a 1 to 2% inflation rate is to encourage people to spend and
yeah,
to invest rather than just sit on their money, right? If you're getting diluted every day by inflation, you're more, I guess, you're incentivized to go try to find ways to earn more than that 1 to 2%, which means investing. And we want that same type of like thought process from a user and the application developers of as you have like more demand, we want you to come in and like really utilize the chain so you can earn more. But it's a tough flywheel to get started, but once it does, I think it'll have a lot of really good effects on Archway. But First, you need to have really good applications that people want to use that drive that demand, and then ultimately create that deflationary schedule.
I think Jerome Powell might need to dive into Archway a little bit, gain some insights on inflation. That's for sure.
Hey, I got no comment on that, but yeah, I would say I tend to agree.
Definitely. How can developers who are interested in Archway get started building on the platform? What's the best way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the cool part is it's permissionless. So you can really go start building whatever you want. And the best way to get the information or figure out how to do that would be going to our website. So archway.io is the main website. But if you go to our docs.archway.io, we have a pretty robust repository of documentation. It can take you anywhere from running a node to just querying a node to creating an application. There's all these different sections that'll lead you through that process depending on what part you're trying to do. Like I said, whether you're a developer or a node operator or just a user trying to understand what's going on, it's all going to be in that docs.archway.io. And that's something we've actually put a lot of time and effort into, was creating a place where someone could go and get all the information they needed, and to actually have like enough information and examples available so that people can go and learn and figure out what they're doing. Because we just found that prior to Archway, that was something we thought was difficult as developers, was, hey, there's just not a lot of documentation, and
Yeah.
sometimes there is, but it's just not very well articulated, or there's no examples. And so you're really just having to figure it out on your own, or go into Discords and these really deep forums and trying to get answers.
Yeah.
And we want to avoid that by giving like a one spot to do that. So that's why our docs page, I just say start there, because we have really put a lot of time and effort to make sure it's all right there for you. And then if you still don't have the answer you're looking for, Discord and our Telegram, we have Builders Crew, it's called. And it's basically a place where any developer could go and get information they need, ask questions, and really interact directly with other builders, as well as like people from the Phi Labs team and other core contributors.
Nice. It's quite nice to know for developers that there's a place to go to find majority of the information needed to start building on Archway.
Yeah.
My final question to you, Max, before we close things off, would simply be 24 is officially here. Do we have any long term vision plans for Archway moving forward in the year? Any big goals we want to achieve, or what's the plans?
Yeah, so 2024 is going to be a huge year for Archer. Actually, we spent most of 2023 getting network built up and live, and then starting to do that kind of initial building out of the ecosystem, and getting those core contributors onboarded, and really starting to take it to the next level. And I think 2024 is our opportunity to do that. We have a lot of things in mind that we think are going to push us to that next level next year, and I think a lot of it will be working with different ecosystems. So I don't know if you saw recently, but we announced that partnership with Icon Network, and we basically worked with them to get XCall, which is a kind of like an Omni wrapper for interoperability protocols, to allow, for example, IBC to plug into XCall, which that can plug into Avalanche's interoperability standard or into Solana's, and then a mutual spot where they all can communicate, which then gives IBC that ability, or other chains, to then inherit the trustlessness of, or I guess trust minimized bridging of IBC. So that's something we think is going to continue to happen as we connect to more and more chains outside of the Cosmos, is get them introduced to IBC and how they can utilize that, and then create this much easier bridging to and from both the Cosmos to Ethereum to Solana to all these different ecosystems, which I think is much needed, both from a security standpoint and a cost standpoint. I think bridges in general, especially ones run by multi-sigs or by centralized third parties, are just too big of a risk for many people, or many people use them without understanding that much they have that much risk. I think IBC offers a much better solution. So to get it to be adopted, I think we have to showcase how it can work and why it's a better solution. And I think working with teams like Icon as like a starting spot is a great way, and then building it out from there to do more. So that's a huge one. And then also stables. We really think that stable liquidity is something that the Cosmos could use a lot more of if they want to seriously compete with the Curves, the Uniswaps of the world. So we're working directly with teams like Gravity, Althea, Noble, even IST, Enter Protocol, and Agoric, trying to work with Kujira and USK to really create a hub for stables and like stable liquidity, bringing three
Yeah.
pools to the Cosmos so that bigger players can come in here and they can swap out large amounts in stables or get in and out of certain pairs in large quantities without taking on massive slippage or without massively unbalancing pools. And so far, we just don't really have that. And so we see it as an opportunity for Archway to come in and use Astrovault primarily as that liquidity hub, and then utilize teams ideally like TFM or Squid or whomever to just route through Astrovault and make them that primary liquidity hub for stables, which we think will drive a lot of activity to Archway and also bring a lot of liquidity over to the Cosmos and Archway as well.
Nice. I look forward to it all. This podcast was as rewarding as an Archway D-app, that's for sure.
You
Max,
bet,
it's
man.
been a true pleasure. Any closing thoughts?
I guess I would say, I don't know when you'll post this, but Happy New Year to everyone. And appreciate you having me on. If you haven't, check out Archway. I think we're doing a lot of cool stuff. But I think in general, I think the Cosmos tech stack is awesome. I think there's a ton of great projects building in this space. If you're new to it, check it out. Check out Archway. And if you're interested in learning more, you can visit the sites I said or me, CryptoChem0000 on Twitter. But yeah, man, appreciate you having me on and would love to do it again sometime.
Of course, Max. Definitely interested in doing it again as well. All the links will be down below. And ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, this has been the Alt Kings podcast, and we will see you all next episode. Peace. Nice.
Welcome to Gilmore Estates, where we pave your way to real estate success. Our state-of-the-art platform is tailored to empower people from diverse backgrounds, helping them thrive in the world of real estate investment. Through the magic of Hedera NFTs, educational resources, and regular evaluations, you'll not only learn but also earn valuable HTS token, G-Coin rewards along the way. Our innovative tokenomics model closely replicates real estate cash flow dynamics, meaning the more G-Coin you possess, the larger your monthly cash flow. And the cherry on top, our Launchpad grants you the opportunity to own fractions of assets from well-established real estate holding companies. Unleash your potential and start your journey to financial success with Gilmore Estates today.